I was surprised that Government of India had an AI policy as early as I think 2018 or 2019, which was pretty early. Not sure how much of it has been put to practice, but good to know. So I right? Who did you go and complain, or who is supposed to fix, or who possibly could have made a mistake? And we looked at it that this is where we have a problem with our modern generative AI systems, or any system that's based on deep learning or neural networks. The problem we talked about earlier, at least not in published paper, as an individual, you're expected to attribute if you have used an idea from somewhere in your research, right? When you write a paper, you give references. How do you ensure that the Gen I does the same thing? If it is using someone else's material, concept, etc., how does it provide the attribution? First of all, it's very difficult to know what and where it picked up that idea from. So if you think about an open area of the research, what we are saying here is in the sense that when an artist produces something, it becomes a creative art, it becomes an original. When the Gen I produces the same or a similar thing, or is it simply copying other people? Again, we're going into the situation of the latent space that I talked about here, in the sense that is it simply copying from the learned art or artistic aspect? Or it has learned something which was not specifically provided to it by the existing art, and then try to figure out that is there something new that it's been using. There might be licensing agreement. This is something which is happening brand new. So think of it, you took a great picture, a photograph. That photograph has already been gone into Gen AI. What rights do you have on that photograph? Are there any licensing mechanisms by which the Gen AI providers or data aggregators are actually going to be utilizing and then using your prior art? Right? Prior art is a word that exists. Encourage collaboration. Like you basically make artists actively, knowingly collaborate with generative AI, providing their own work, and then let that work be used as an inspiration rather than a source, right? Revise copyright laws. I mean, that's one of the things that needs to happen, because what's the definition of copyright when your work has been consumed by a generative AI, converted from a two-dimensional image into maybe a 200-dimension space, whereby the image or the work does not exist as is. It's been broken down in thousands of pieces and it exists somewhere as string of numbers. What does the copyright law mean in that case, right? We talked about the ethical challenges and a lot of issues which could be misrepresented. Earlier, not yesterday or day before, I think last week, we talked about instances where fake videos are coming up, fake audios are coming up, all kinds of fake content is being generated and distributed around it. So that risk exists. That's an ethical challenge that exists. And then also, how do you make the consumer differentiate between fake or incorrect information versus the correct and or creative information? It's easy to change the public's opinion also, or manipulate that. So how exactly are we trying to figure out what's right, what's not right, what's intentionally incorrect, and what's just happens to be a hallucination, whereby the model actually made a mistake because that's how it does, it works. So to deal with these ethical challenges, there are a lot of different ways. developing detection tool. Some of these startup companies are actually working in that area, whereby they're attempting to do at least two things, if not more. A, detect if the work is produced by Gen AI, right? A lot of that work is happening in education, academics area, whereby you submit a work, like an assignment, and then we run it through a service which tells us whether you wrote it or whether it seems like it's been produced by Gen AI. Detection tool, also the detection tool trying to get where there is an incidence of hallucination, in the sense that where whatever has been produced has patently wrong information or incorrect information. Harder part on the detection tools are, is it violating a copyright law? That's a tougher part right now. I'm sure there are people, I'm not aware of any active, I shouldn't say any active, any concluded research on this or any directions in this whereby we are getting it, but I'm sure there are people who are looking at it, trying to detect not just that it's produced by Gen AI, not that just that it has incorrect information or instance of hallucination, but also trying to find where you have potentially violated copyright laws. Think of it, not that this work has not been done, right? YouTube, for example, if you upload a video that has been copyrighted by another party, YouTube will flag it. YouTube will tell you that your video has been removed because it's violating copyright law. It also implements the regional copyright laws. So for example, there's content, for example, let's say Indian cricket match, right? It is only visible, for example, in India. You can't watch certain things outside because they have different expectations, different rules and things like that. The other two pieces here, educating users and encouraging ethical standards, basically says that, hey, we don't have technology or technical means to detect it, so why not educate both sides? The people who might be producing unethical output, train them not to do that if they are doing inadvertently, and or basically have regulations so that they can see what the consequences might be, and educating the user. Don't trust anything and everything that you see on the internet, especially if it's coming out of the generative AI. Huge problem if you think about it for people who are not conversant enough. You are in a very, very tiny minority who understands how the deep learning works, how these models are working. Majority of the people, if they have the phone, if they receive a deep fake video, they have no way of knowing that this could be a fake video, right? They might treat it as if something which is real and may take unintended actions based on that, right? So regulatory challenges, we talked about all four of them. I have just put them here in together: transparency, biases and fairness, intellectual property, privacy. Maybe if you are a computer science student, these issues are slightly at the periphery. But if you are a social science student, if you are a management student, or if you're trying to run a business, all of these issues are important for you. I mean, I'm not saying that CS students should not be interested in this, but there's a whole lot of research that we are doing. As a matter of fact, there is going to be a course at NJIT where I'm teaching about bias and fairness. I mentioned that in data and algorithms. So that's a course for CS students primarily. So all that kind of is relevant, important, active area of research, and something in which we keep on teaching students about. Okay, any questions? Yes, no, maybe? Bias, fairness, ethics. All right, so if not, let's just continue to move on because we have a slightly limited time today. Let's move on the AI regulation part, right? Because I said there are three things. We can do detection, we can do regulation, and we can do education. Education of consumer and education of producer. So we talked about a few of the detection related ideas. Let's look at the regulations. Now regulations are happening in different places at different speed. Not only that, they've also taken slightly different position also. So when I say slightly different position, it would be, for example, that let's take an example that you guys might be familiar with on social media, right? The social media had couple of different ways the two major companies were dealing with it. Let's say the Twitter and the Facebook, for example, right? That Twitter would apply the automatic detection methodology and try to flag your post. It would also of late started doing where it will say that this message has been shared multiple times, so that you know that, or the person who's receiving knows it, you're not, whoever is sending it to him or her, it's not their original thought. They have received it and then forwarding it. So that's one model. There's another model which says the fact checker model, where people apply human beings. They apply human beings where human beings are employed to fact check sometime random information, sometime information that has been flagged, sometime information that has been reported or complained about. Those are like two different approaches. There are different pros and cons. There are different commercial reasons how exactly and why exactly a company has chosen the way they have chosen to work on it. So similar way, when the governments make the regulation, they may choose differently. So we're going to look at a couple of different countries before we come to India. So if you think about it, the US. First of all, US most of the approaches are done by most of the regulations at this point of time are done by the federal government or the countrywide. Except that on privacy, I mentioned yesterday CCPA, which was state of California. The California has implemented those laws. So one of the things that US government has done is that they've already introduced an Algorithmic Accountability Act. One of the reason or one of the impetus that we have for creating that course that I mentioned earlier, that we are going to do an algorithmic transparency and fairness and biases course. So there is an Algorithmic Accountability Act. The interest of that act is that if an algorithm is being used for decision making and or prediction, the person or the company or the inventor who has come up with this algorithm has certain responsibilities and accountability if someone is complaining about the results of those algorithms. Deepfakes Accountability Act. Deepfake, as I mentioned, is a huge problem. So in US, there's already an act which says that who's accountable for deepfake. This is still an open area of legislation. Legislation exists, but people are still trying to figure out, in the sense that the act as it stands today, not only the person who created and initiated the deepfake, but also the person who inadvertently or advertently forwarded it. The expectation is that you have a certain responsibility if you are forwarding. You cannot simply say that I did not know it, I found it and I forwarded it. You can't necessarily do that. There is a Digital Services Oversight and Safety Act, which is trying to establish some kind of a framework if and when the AI is being used for critical or high-risk AI systems. So a lot of regulations are coming. There's no cohesive national strategy yet because the AI risks are still being discovered. But that's what the current state of art in US is. Things are changing. As some of you may know, I think one of you probably pointed out that last week there was another report which was produced by the US House. So things are changing very fast. These laws will continue to evolve and change. This is the approach in the United States. If you compare this with the Europe, so European Union has taken a slightly different approach. All the US laws are generic in nature, which means that they apply to everything independent of what the AI is doing. What Europe is trying to do is slightly differently. What they're saying is that we will identify the risk inherent, and depending on the risk, we will make it more regulated or less regulated. So what they're trying to do, or they're saying, is that the high risk uses of AI are prohibitive. So in a way, they're trying to be a little bit more granular, but they're going granular to the extent where they're saying that you cannot use AI in this process, right? So for example, US is already using it for sentencing, US is already using it for medical, coming up with a plan for a person who is receiving medical help. Europe is saying that too risky right now, you can't use AI for that purpose. There's a mandatory risk assessment, because if you are maintaining a high risk dependent regulation, then you got to have for each application a risk assessment and a requirement for transparency. So that's one way they are differentiating. And because they are encouraging risk assessment, they are basically creating a EU-wide database for high-risk systems. So they're trying to say that we're not creating the regulations across the spectrum for all AI-driven systems because we want AI to be adopted, but we want to have the risks to be assessed, and based on that, either you are having a higher regulation or maybe you are prohibited from using it. So two different set of approaches. We don't know which one is right, which one is wrong. Both claim to be more open, but it all depends how we look at it. Asia Pacific region, outside India, if you think about it, China has strict regulation, but majority of their strict regulation are focused on national security interest. Outside that, they're fairly open, or as long as you have access to the government, you can implement a fairly wide variety of applications. Singapore is going, and Japan obviously are going in two different, slightly different areas, where they're saying that we're going to follow the stakeholder model, voluntary disclosures, voluntary frameworks where the companies encourage innovation, but ensures that the underlying AI is used in a responsible manner. So if you see that three different regional governments have gone in three different directions for trying to regulate the AI industry, right? Now, we talked about a little bit why this is happening, but if you think about, a lot of it comes from local traditions, cultural values, economic priorities. Pacific East, or East in general, defers to traditional values, defers to hierarchy. So Singapore and Japan have followed a slightly different mechanisms. US generally says that we want to be open, and we do not want to differentiate whether you are a small company, large company, same rules for everyone. So they have that kind of an approach. Europe says that no, government will determine what the risks are. You do the risk assessment, we will either agree or not agree, and based on that, we'll let you know what you can or cannot do. So a lot of differences because of cultural values, economic priorities, local traditions, and things like that, and the readiness of the people. Key difference in all these three things, if you think about it, and we talked about a little bit last time, what is the harm? That itself has a questionable thing, because neither all involved parties nor all jurisdictions agree right now as we speak that what is the harm. I mean, somebody might say that, okay, AI has generated an image, it seems to have taken certain pieces from your photograph. The way the mountain is depicted there is from one photo that you took like 8 years ago. Is that a harm, or what is the harm from that? So the definition of the harm has different interpretation based on their interest. If you took that photograph as an amateur, nobody ever saw it, it's only in your folio, maybe you don't have that much of an economic interest. But if you are, let's say, a natural photographer, or then you might say that, no, that's my livelihood. That's how I earn my living. So you can't just steal my idea or my photo, or I spent 12 hours, I sat there so that there's a right amount of cloud cover, there's a right amount of sunlight, there's a right amount of angle, and that's how I got this picture. You can't simply just steal and use it, right? So definition of the harm is still an open area, because different people may have different interpretation of what, if at all there is a harm, and if there is a harm, what's the extent of the harm. Related aspect of this is that, let's say that harm is established, what's the damage? As I gave you the example, you and I who took the picture randomly, it turned out to be great, might say that, okay, if I get like 5,000 rupees, I'm okay with it as a damage. The person whose livelihood depends on that picture, who actually had a huge investment in the camera and the time to get the right angle, right time, right color, right sunlight, etc., might say that no, my harm or the damage to me is much, much bigger. So there's always an issue. How do you assess the damage? And then the question comes is that, does it mean that we want to stop people to express themselves, whether directly or indirectly, right? So one of the things in trying to get some kind of standardization, I use the term standardization, what is happening is that a lot of professional bodies are trying to come up with standards. So they're saying that if there is no agreement in here, it will be difficult to regulate. To get to that point, let's try to see if there are some standards. Those standards will then say that if you do this, this is what the definition of harm is, this is how the damage will be calculated, this is how somebody might be compensated, etc., etc. The beauty of the standard is that, I mean, there's no one standard. Everybody has their own standards. So yes, the standardization is a good effort, but we have quite a few different initiatives which are trying to standardize things. ISO is doing one. Many of these agencies you probably may have heard. ISO is probably known. IEEE standards has its own. NIST or NIST is a US agency for defining these standards, just like ISI here. So there are a lot of agencies which are trying to come up with standards in the different areas, right? ISO is doing something different, IEEE is trying to do something different, NIST is trying to do something different. They may get together. There's a couple of other agencies which are not yet there. NC, for example, like those who are in computer science would know, there are a lot of NC standards. NC has not come up with their own ideas, but they would be coming up with their own standards. In healthcare, there's one body that I am it's called CHAI, C-H-A-I, Health Committee for Health and AI, or Committee of Health and AI, something like that. So that's another. This is not like ISO or IEEE or NIST. This is a stakeholders body that has come up and that's trying to say that can we ensure the what is this? I'm forgetting the right word, but then acceptable use of AI in health. I'm paraphrasing this. Standard is one thing. Cultural barriers, we talked about the cultural barriers. Now the cultural barriers on this slide talks about the acceptance of the generated content. A lot of different places will have different receiving or different way of adopting or adapting to the generative AI. Fear of job displacement. Many of you mentioned about it. Concerns about erosion of human creativity. People may not have realized it, but that might be another concern that might be happening. Skepticism about AI's ability to understand cultural nuances. That's another problem because there may be cultural nuances, there may be things that are interpreted differently. Shaking hand, eye movement, bowing down, lot of different cultural nuances that people are aware. Has AI learned about them? Has it learned to actually take those regional nuances or cultural differences across different geographical areas, different communities, different user base, etc., etc. Cultural authenticity. Now this is an even more difficult question, right? We have historical stories, right? We have stories about I mean, you can go about anything. There's a Kalidas's Natakas, right? Kalidas has written, what if Gen AI produces a play which follows the same style as Kalidas had? How is it going to work? Will there be a relevant or respect for the authenticity of the work? What if somebody produces work and then without attributing it, just distributes it, claiming that it is original? People have done that all over the place. There are paintings created which were told or sold or mentioned that this is a painting from Picasso, right? So all kinds of issues of cultural authenticity in the automated generated content will be a question mark. So a lot of ways where the adoption or the usage of the AI could be impacted. How do you overcome this resistance? Education, awareness, engagement, you demonstrate the value or implement them gradually. Now all of these things, we talked about it. Most of these strategies are same across the board whenever any new technology comes. I know when I was at your age there, computerization in banking, which was the very first area. Actually, I shouldn't say first area. The first area in US where the computers got general use case was in rail reservation. So that started very early. And the second thing was the bank automation. And there was a lot of resistance. More or less same strategies were applied. Bank employees were educated, created awareness. Bank employees union were made as a stakeholder. There were assurances that you will not lose the job, you will be retrained, reskilled, demonstrating the value. They were shown the value that you don't need to stay overnight there. The computers can do the job much quicker. You can go home. There's a value in there. And gradual implementation. It wasn't introduced as a big bang approach. Few branches were chosen first. Some of the functionality in that branch was chosen first. So you do the gradual implementation. Similar kind of strategies can be applied to make sure that the AI is being introduced much more rapidly. Okay. Any questions in terms of how the use of AI or AI-based systems are regulated across the world? If you try to summarize it, or if you send whatever I said to a ChatGPT and ask it to summarize it, maybe it will say like what we discussed here. A couple of different things. A, not every government is following the same principles for regulation. What US is doing, what Europe is doing, what Asia Pacific is doing is slightly different. We talked about how they're doing it, but the important point is that in many cases they are trying to cater to their regional ambitions, their financial strategies, and their cultural background. How the people are willing to accept and or use the new technology as AI. We looked at why there are no standards yet. We looked at the major standardization agencies and what they're trying to do. We also looked at the what else can be done to increase the awareness and or the increase the usage of the AI and or AI-based systems. Right? That's what we did in terms of the regulation and whatever is going on in the regulation. Any ideas, questions, or anything like that? Yes?
You mentioned Singapore and Japan follow stakeholder-based model for designing the regulation. So can you elaborate?
Okay, so if you think about it, let's look at it, first of all, what the US and the Europe is doing, right? US is saying that, first of all, in US, there are no nationwide standards, but they're trying to come up, there's no coordinated single policy, they're trying to come up with different policies. But the way it stands right now, all their regulations apply to every company, small, large, medium, startup, established, uniformly. So what they're saying is that whatever regulations we're going to do, everybody has to follow the same. What Europe is saying is that yes and no. They're saying that we will regulate based on what your AI is supposed to do. So what the risks are, and based on that we will allow. Now, so in a way, you can look at it from both perspectives. They're saying that we will give you a free hand to develop if your risks of your systems are not very high, but we will stop you from making or deploying a certain AI system if the risks are very high. So what it means that there has to be a risk assessment. There has to be a government body which agrees with your risk assessment. Based on that, it will either give you permission to implement or not, right? The Asia Pacific is saying we have different problems. First of all, the AI utilization is not that high compared to Europe and US. So they also have an issue related to are are population ready. So what they are saying is that we're going to use the stakeholder model whereby we'll bring everybody together. The government, the companies which are generating or they are creating the generative AI solutions, and the users also. We will train them and then let the regulation evolve from there. So they're not taking a position that we will have you do risk assessment and then make the decision based on that. They're also not going the US way, saying that same regulation, everybody has to follow that. They're saying that we'll bring the stakeholders, we'll bring them close, and then have them kind of suggest or come up with their own self-driven regulations kind of thing.
So government intervention is not dominant.
I won't say that actually. All I'm saying is that it is trying to bring most of the stakeholders together and let the regulations evolve. There is a possibility that at some point of time in future, all three approaches may come together. The reason they are doing in different way, because as I said that a lot of it is cultural in nature, a lot of it is where in the growth you are, and all of that come together.
Same thing should be followed for India also.
We'll talk about India in the next few minutes, what India is doing. All right. Any other question? Okay, all right, so let's just move in here, India. What is India doing? So we're going to look at India problem. Initially, I thought I'll spend at least an hour on what India is doing, but we kind of compress it. We'll probably talk about for the next 15, 20 minutes in India's thing. Feel free to correct me. Now, I'm not like an expert on what is happening in AI in India. It's based on what my limited kind of research in last maybe couple of weeks before I came here, and I just for that purpose I've included all the sources that I consulted. So if you want to go in a little bit more detail, you can actually go in there and see. Some of them, as I mentioned, are old, 5 to 6 year old. India's AI policy came in, and I'm forgetting exactly year 2018 or 2019. We'll see that it's somewhere on the slide. So what we are going to do, we're going to look into India's role in a couple of different ways, right? First, we're going to look into it, what is going on in the development part of it. Like, how is the landscape, how is the ecosystem looking like? Do we have, for example, enough funding available? How is the startup culture in AI space in India? Then we're going to look into, is Indian user base ready for adoption of the AI? And then we will look into what the government is doing to either regulate and or promote the use of AI in India, right? So that's what we are going to do. There were multiple ways to look into it. I have not, and the references that I have given you have followed different approaches. When you say different approaches, they could be based on regions, they could be based on the type of application and things like that. I have picked up selectively a few things, especially because of I had to compress, not discuss it for an hour, and somewhat easier or lighter way. So one of the way that I picked up is that if you are trying to figure out or discuss India's growth in the AI world, I thought one of the way to look at will be from different sectors' perspective. And this is a viewpoint of the businesses involved in the development or use of AI. So if you think about it, we can think of the three different ways: the infrastructure, the applications, and the services. So there are a lot of Gen AI models which are being trained. At least that's what the companies claim. I have no way of confirming it one way or the other. That are trying to be in the large or vertical spaces in India. That's the claim several companies are making. I'll tell you that one or two things where I was very pleasantly surprised that what the government is doing, but I'll come to that. Application space. A lot of companies are working on coding assistants and also on the conversational agent spaces. Apparently, and this is not based on my own original research, I am quoting from one of the references here. The numbers doubled last year. This is based on 2023 data, so not even 2024 data. They said the number of companies involved in developing AI applications doubled from 20 to 45. This number may be in hundreds now at this point of time. There are three different models which are generally used worldwide. The three dominant model in India being generative AI as a service, or the enterprise platform, or data as a service, that have been promoted, and there are companies working on those kind of approaches as well. If we continue to look for what India is doing in AI, investment landscape is improving. Again, I have no way of corroborating this number, but this is from a McKinsey report, so I would trust it. They're saying in the first half of 2024, India received, the startups in India, AI startups in India received close to $760 million. Not a small number, which is, I think, if you take out implementation, some companies may have received $50 million, $100 million, some may have received $2, $4, $5 million. So there's a lot of investment that is happening from the community, from the investor community across the world, in a way that they are showing some kind of belief and or trust in India's AI potential, that India can potentially do good work in AI. There's an active encouragement for research and development in IITs, IIS, ISI. Unfortunately, NITs were not mentioned in that report yet, but hopefully things will change. You will see a lot of NITs also start showing up in the active AI research. I didn't see it in here. All right. Now, this is the part where I was pleasantly surprised. What the government is doing. Government has created an AI mission. There's an AI strategy, and there is an AI portal. And this was the portal, and I included the link here, which I was pleasantly surprised. This portal also actually has a source of data that you can use. Now, a lot of that data is international data. I'm sure they have probably must have received or must have gotten into some kind of an agreement. So, but the good thing is that as a portal, you don't need to go to 10 different places or search for it. You can go to the portal and get the data. A lot of this data is available for you to use to train your models and things like that. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised that portal exists. It works. It's not that bad, poorly designed. It's very well designed, easy to access. I didn't count, but I think there are probably, I would say, 30 or 40 different data sets that are available in various areas, right? Majority of them, there are some actually Indian data sets available as well. There was, I noticed that something I mentioned yesterday, there is a data set for Sanskrit. So to train a model on Sanskrit, for example. So there are some data sets which are natively Indian or Indian cultural background. A few of the other missions, Digital India, Make in India, Smart Cities, they're also incorporating AI in their approaches. So quite a few different government initiatives. And as I said that, I would encourage, if you have not seen this AI portal, go there and see. It is putting together a lot of information in one place that would help you for research development or deployment across the country, right? There are a lot of plan in the AI strategy. There were a lot of, I think I may not have included all of them. No, actually I may have it. Indian government actually has, I think they have, I forgot the exact number, but like 10,000 GPUs which will be deployed. It was a 2024 number. I'm sure they probably have been deployed either in IITs or IIS or somewhere. They were talking about making it generally available, because with the network here, you don't need the compute power locally. You could actually sit here and use the compute power of thousands of GPUs located in one central facility. Now, I can't say whether it has completed or it's been completed or not. At least that was the plan earlier. So the national strategy, that's where I find it. I think it will be included here. What the NSAI is proposing, and yeah, this came in 2018. This was the one I was referring to, that they came up a strategy paper in 2018 or 2019. It was 2018. It's branded as AI for all. Again, this is something I learned like this week. Basically, two-tiered structure. Centers for Research Excellence, which are doing fundamental research in AI. Now, I don't know where they are and have they started yet or not, but that's what at least the strategy said. I'm hoping that because it came in 2018, we are at 2025 now, at least some centers must have started by now, but I'm sure you guys can find out, those of you who have interest on it. And then they said that they'll create international centers for transformational AI, which will take the core centers and then try to bring the collaboration and then bring more international expertise and then try to create some AI-based applications. So first one is trying to do the basic research. The second ones are trying to do the applied research so that the innovation increases. I don't see any problem with the strategy. This is fairly decent strategy which has been followed by government. I can't vouch for funding and I can't vouch for how exactly the execution is happening, but all of you are in a good place to actually explore, find out, and see how it aligns with your interests, whether you are trying to do development, research, adoption, whatever the case may be, right? Now, as I said that I took the sector-wise approach for development, I took the same angle on the deployment aspect of it. So again, the strategy on AI has identified 5 key sectors: healthcare, agriculture, education, smart cities, and smart mobility. Again, there is no reason to argue with those interests. Now, some of it might be, you might say that based on the local needs. The healthcare and agriculture and education are 3 key needs in India. So trying to improve or trying to bring in the AI in those sectors is definitely a good idea, right? All of it is coming, and I have a reference there, is coming from the strategy paper which came out in 2018 from Niti Aayog, so you should be able to see this. Then I looked at some of the startups, as I mentioned. By no means I have used them all. By no means I can vouch for that they are doing the right thing or the wrong thing. I'm just picking it up. Let me know if any of you have used it or are coming or have been aware of. Yellow.ai, has anyone heard of it? Kogo OS, Niram or Cure, healthcare AI companies. Early disease detection, large action model, and then the routine task for business productivity. I'm not vouching for them. I'm just giving an example that there are companies which are doing some good work here. There's another one called CropIn or Intello Labs, trying to be in agri-tech sector. CoRover, which is trying to create a conversational AI platform. Claim to have 1 billion users. I'm not sure. That looks a very exaggerated number. Karya, which is trying to do a multilingual AI data sets. Keep in mind, some of these companies, especially the third one here, Karya, may have achieved what I mentioned yesterday on a training data set, something like a multilingual AI data set, right? If they have gone beyond that, like something that can be deployed, i.e., I can take it like a Google Translate. I go to Bangalore, I speak in Hindi or English, and it speaks up in Kannada, and then I can talk to anyone or like use it to translate. I'm not sure how far they are. The references that I mentioned are all here. There's a national strategy on AI. There's AI regulation that came from KPMG, which is really a multinational company. McKinsey is another management consulting company that is trying to figure out. NESCOM is Indian trade group. Your Story is another private organization that has come up in terms of that came up with an article actually that how the Frost & Sullivan is an international company, management consultants. World Bank, obviously you know it. PwC is another management consulting company, but this is the India branch. Branch is not the right word. India office that's doing it, and again a McKinsey report. So from my perspective, all of them are fairly reputable sources. They range anywhere from 2018 to 2023. Things may have changed, I'm sure, and things must have changed for better, I presume, but that's where we are. Lot of different sources. If you are interested in research, if you are interested in figuring out what other possibilities exist in India, by all means feel free, look at those documents or references and then make yourself aware of it, right? Okay, any questions now? Especially about India, how the playground in India is that the company is doing the investment, the regulation, the education, the research sectors, and things like that. Anyone? Any questions? All right. If not, then we're going to take last 15 minutes. I think at 11, there's probably going to be a quiz or a test there. I hope you guys have paid attention and will do good, right? At least from my side, it's a multiple choice question. So you should be able to really kind of recall. As I mentioned, I don't know if somebody asked this question that how do we test there? Maybe not in this setting. Maybe I was doing some student interaction. That's where they asked the question. So usually we test on two different ways. A recall, simply saying that do you remember what we talked about? And then the application of it, which is where I say that you convert the knowledge into intelligence. So recall is just the knowledge. Do you remember it? Can you recollect it? There's a little bit of smartness because what happens in a multiple choice question, if it's a good multiple choice question, it forces you to think. Because they're probably out of 4 options, there may be 2 which look like, okay, both of them could be right. So you got to think about it, which one is actually right. Which one is better right than, though they may be both right, but they're saying which is the strongest one, so you need to pick that. Okay, so the last thing that we want to talk about is that, what do we think about the future of Gen AI? I guess all of you are attending this program, so you think the future is great, right? But let's see what's in the future. Part of it will also indicate where the research is happening, or at least the expectation is. Keep in mind, especially with AI, and this is what we were talking about. I had faculty interactions with the computer science department yesterday. Spent about 2 hours. I looked around in the department as well. What we studied, the general thrust of the conversation for the first part was that what we studied, we means the faculty here, especially those who studied AI in 80s and 90s, is not what we have AI today. So the reason I'm mentioning it is that what we think future of generative AI today may not be what probably happens 10 years from now. Things can change. So what we are talking about is where the research is heading today, right? So one of the most important area that's happening is multimodal AI. Are you familiar with multimodal? So think of the OpenAI ChatGPT 4.0, for example. So multimodal AI is saying is that no longer you are separating that text is one silo, image is another silo, audio, video is another silo. They're trying to create now the models that combine all different modes of interaction. So if you go back on the day one, right, we were asking, or we were trying to discuss is that, can the AI take over humans, right? And I said that we have 5 senses. AI is right now only at 1 or 2. The multimodal AI is in the direction where it's saying is that if we want to make it closer, mirror the human ability to integrate different types of sensory information. 5 senses, so trying to get there. Not there yet, we're too far. Taste and smell not even yet attempted in any serious way. But the other 3 senses, they're trying to be, the research is in combining or integrating them together to get into what's called multimodal AI. The second part, active area of research is customizable generative AI. Now, if you think about it, RAG is one direction. Now that's no longer a research direction, though there are a lot of areas within the RAG that are active research topics. But the idea there is that, can we take the base or foundation model? See, very quickly people have realized that you can't necessarily create language models for your own area because it's very expensive. Yes, you can create toy models, but they're not useful in real use case. So can there be customizable generative AI? Take the base foundation model, customize it, tailor it for specific industry, specific country, specific use case. Lot of different things. The idea there is that rather than diffusing effort in having a lot of large language models, can we have these base foundation model? And some of you may have heard the term called small language models, basically. The approach is the same. One is that they're trying to bring it to lower power devices on your hand. Part of the reason is that the federated learning that is might be happening. Part of the reason is that can we customize a large language model, a base or a foundation model into a smaller targeted area, right? Very active area of research, and I personally think that this would be something that we would see a lot more action is in AI agents and automation. The end goal is that can we make the AI agents which can actually interact among themselves. Now, again, that's also a situation where people have started saying that if you let that do, maybe a day will come that agents come together and then start thinking of ruling over individuals. But that's a different story. The AI agents would basically say that, let's say, for example, and I'm giving you the example of the US market, the airline tickets prices keep fluctuating. You can have an agent which keeps an eye on it. You cannot look for it. I mean, you can check it like twice a day, 3 times a day, but an agent can keep looking at for you all the time and then take the action. So a lot of active area of research in the AI agents and automation that is happening. That is probably going to continue. Not only it's the active area of research, it's also the area where actually the development is happening. As a matter of fact, agentic AI is the area that we are teaching the master students in the master's AI students, basically. Okay, the next area is the economic impact. Now, these are just suggestions, basically. How much the economic impact of generative AI could be. So there's been different numbers that worldwide the AI can actually add somewhere from 2.6 trillion to 4.4 trillion annually across various use cases. To take in perspective, India's GDP is around 3 trillion or little over 3 trillion. So what they're saying is that the generative AI can have an economic impact as big worldwide as the India's economy, which is really the 4th or 5th largest economy. So bottom line is that the huge impact on a lot of different sectors leading to better economic impact. Okay. Now, we talked about the GDP, how it's calculated and how the economic impact is calculated, right? If your GDP is growing faster than the growth of the inputs, then it's better. The growth of the inputs, input means the number of people who are working or their efficiency. The expectation is that all of the economic impact because of the GDP would be in the efficiency aspect of it, partially overcoming, if at all, there is a negative impact on the employment. First of all, nobody thinks that there's going to be a negative impact because the jobs will shift. We saw this example from the prior technological revolutions, printing press, industrial automation or the industrial age, and then the information age, which is the internet, right? So majority of the economic impact is expected to come from productivity gains, which is the efficiency. What we are saying is that nearly 80% of the job in US economy, which is heavily service dependent economy because the manufacturing has moved out of US majority of the time, they're saying that at least 10% of the task will be twice as fast. So the productivity gains will lead to better economic benefits. You're able to do more, you're able to get more work done, etc., etc. Many of it is possibly true, right? If you are generating content, if you are producing an email, you're writing some kind of, let's say, a letter, you're generating a marketing copy, you're writing some kind of distribution document, a newspaper article, Gen AI is helping in making you more productive. Labor market shift, we talked about it, that clearly there will be some shifts in the labor market. The way the people are employed today might change a little bit. Reskilling is needed. People need to learn new skills. But overall, still the hope is that the labor market gains would be in positive direction after some reskilling and retraining. That's the case that we are doing. Entirely new skill sets may emerge, which has already happened. There was no jobs like a prompt engineer earlier. Now you have prompt engineer, you have knowledge engineers, right? whose job is not to generate the knowledge, but really consume the knowledge for the generative AI. So a lot of new job descriptions are coming up as well. Rapid adoption and integration, that's another potential area where the AI would go. There are few indicators already. To get 1 billion users, Facebook took years. Twitter also took years, right? WhatsApp did slightly faster. ChatGPT took months. Within months, they had like billion users. So the adoption is very, very fast. Integration is also probably happening at a very fast pace. If you think about it, WhatsApp got integrated in the businesses very quickly compared to any other technology before it, right? Expectation is that the Gen AI will, or the large language models will also get integrated. Now, this is an expectation. There are a lot of issues here because we saw all these risks that were there. Reputation risk, hallucination risk, the risk for damages. We saw cases whereby Air Canada was sued by its user because its AI chatbot was giving out wrong information, etc., etc. Okay, so there are risks there. Now, because of the timing constraints, one or two things that I wanted to cover, which I have not yet covered. I think this is the last one. Yeah. So let me give you some ideas here if any of you are interested in the topics that we covered today, yesterday, and things like that. There's a very, very detailed study on the use case which I mentioned where the AI is being used on sentencing guidelines. And the study is about biases, inherent bias in the data and algorithm. If any of you are interested, if you want to go in, so I'm kind of shifting gears, not just the research. If you want to become a developer of AI systems, as against the MIS or any other kind of thing, you have to be aware of the inherent biases in your data and algorithm. That's a great study. If anybody is interested, reach out to me. I'll probably include it in the Google Classroom. So you should look into it because that's a good work that has been done over a period of time, right? The other one, there's some amount of work where there's a book by one of the old Google researchers, Timnit Gebru. She actually resigned from Google because she didn't agree with, or actually Google did agree with her approaches. Talking about where the math is dangerous. So there is a book called, has anyone heard this term called weapons of mass destruction? That was used in Iraq war 20 years ago. So the book is called Weapons of Math Destruction, where they say that the math is the problem here. Because if you think about all generative AI is all math, right? So they're saying that the math itself can be deceptive and or biased. So that's an approach there. If you are going in the AI systems or building AI systems, I would say those two sources are very good. All right, any questions? Anyone? On anything that we did in the last 10 days or so? Yes, no, maybe? All right, let me ask the question here. When do you guys think that you will see a 2-hour movie totally created by the generative AI? You see it happening? You do? Okay, if that happens, who all will lose their jobs? Why would you pay Shah Rukh Khan if the Gen AI can generate the movie? Right? Okay, all right. When do you think you will see a book written by generative AI? Next 10 years? Okay. How soon? 1 year? Okay. So Gen AI has already written its first book. It happened last year. So Google it and you will find it. Is it a great book? Probably not. People found it interesting? No, but a book has been written. Okay? All right, let's see. When do you think you will see the autonomous cars in India? Sorry? 15, 20 years? That's interesting. I thought somebody will say that we don't need them. There's a possibility that car will not go anywhere because the people come from all directions. It will just stay there in that one place, right? Okay, all right. Any other questions? Actually, that's an interesting cultural story. So, General Motors, you know General Motors, right? It's a big car company. They went into the Latin American market, actually Mexico. This is a more than 50, 60-year story. It's usually covered in marketing management courses. I mean, I don't know if anybody has done the marketing management courses about the cultural sensitivities, right? So they introduced a model called Nova. Yeah, nothing wrong. The car was not selling, and then they were struggling that what's going on here. Then they realized that in Mexican or in Spanish, which is the language used, Nova means the car doesn't go anywhere. Right? So there are cultural issues involved in all these kind of things. So I was expecting that somebody will say that we don't need the autonomous car here because, hey, we don't need it because we already have drivers and people who can drive, and or it won't probably go anywhere because there's so many cars so close that it will just not move. It will just stay there. All right, last opportunity. Any questions? Because we're going to take a stop here and then have your test done. No? Okay, if no questions, then all the best. Some of you probably will end up on your machine learning journey. You probably do something more about machine learning. I'll be happy to know. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to me. Okay. I think that's where we're going to stop. And hopefully, they have ready the tests for you.